right, everyone. Hello. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Paketo Working Group meeting. Today is April the 12th, and well, we're glad that you're here. Feel free to add yourself to the attendees list in case you have done so. And yeah, well, who would like to take notes in today's session? There anyone who would like to do so?
I can take notes.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Great. Okay, new faces. I don't think so. No. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Right, so let's move to the review of standing RFCs. As far as I saw, there are a couple of new RFCs, which is great. The stack bomb RFC is still blocked, right? So we should move to the next one. Source removal build pack. Is there any comment update around this RFC?
So I haven't been here for a couple of weeks, just been out and busy. It looks like it has plenty of approval. I guess my question is what if this is waiting on anything in particular to merge, or
it just needs to be merged.
Cool.
Yeah, there were a lot of these that were in this state, and I am not surprised if I just lost track of the fact that it needed to be merged.
all good. Just to know if you all needed anything else from me.
Need to be merged. Next up, secure runtime environment.
I did ping Sam in Slack to ask what we needed to move forward on this one. And it looks like he got back to commenting on it, but I have not gotten back to looking at it since then.
Yeah, the updates are pretty recent. Okay. So we'll have to check back again with them. Any other comment around this RFC? No. All right. Next, image retention policy. The Daniel here. No. Emily put some comments a couple of weeks ago. Beside this, is there any update you're aware of about this RFC? Okay, seems like no. All right. Okay. Next up, the tag descriptor RFC. There have been some discussions there. But I was wondering if there's any update.
I don't think so. I think there's like ongoing conversation. It's mostly conversation about things like where are the files ultimately going to end up? What are those repos called? Some kind of like tech details. But it'll get hashed out in the comments, I think.
Okay. Okay, makes sense. Okay, next up, there is well, I believe it's a new RFC. Joshua, so I don't know if you want to comment something about this one.
I added this RFC. I think the conversation is resolved and it has the approvals from the PHP maintainers. I think that there was an issue merging it, if I recall. So no one on the PHP maintainers can merge it, but I think it has the approvals it needs to be merged.
Where is this RFC located, like in the file structure of the RFC's repo? Because anything that is in the, unless this is like meant to be a top level RFC, if this is nested inside of the PHP RFC's folder, it should be mergeable by just the PHP maintainers after their approval.
That's a good call. I bet there's a git ignore that includes a .idea that adds .idea because that's my ID of choice. So I'll remove that and then we can get the approvals and probably a PHP maintainer can merge it at that point.
Okay, there's also a new one, but it's in a draft state. I don't see the author here. Or Daniel.
Since Dan's not here and it's in a draft, maybe we should just skip over this one for now.
Yeah. Finally, Jamstack.
I'm glad we're getting this out here. I feel like this is a great one for group bike shedding. When it comes to the names of labels and stack IDs. I have just finished leaving a couple comments here of bike shed conversations I think we should have. I'm not saying that I'm totally wedded to one answer or the other. My mind, the first one is we're going with IO Paketo rather than IO Buildpacks. It kind of makes sense because it's, the Buildpacks project to define things in the IO Buildpacks namespace, and they haven't, and there's only real mix-in definitions for Bionic, stuff like that. I would argue that despite the fact that makes logical sense, we might want to use it anyways because the project is moving away from stacks, so it's not going to define more stacks, and this would be consistent for our users, and it's pretty easy for people to extrapolate and know what the intention is.
So we can rely on you as like an authoritative member of the core team for CNB, that we're not stepping on anyone's toes if we basically like form a land grab of their namespace.
Yeah, I would be really shocked if anyone cared, especially because they're trying to move away from stack IDs. And if that stack ID were to be defined, I think it would have to mean, a stack built on top of Jammy. It would be very strange otherwise. But as long as we're not, I think the only thing that you could possibly imagine there being a contradiction for, I don't think this would happen, is in mix-in definitions. But if we're sort of not even trying to apply those, then there's no danger there.
Yeah. This is the thing I think I care the least about. The only reason I went with the Paketo one was just because I didn't think we were allowed to declare something in the Buildpacks namespace. But if you're saying that's cool, then
What does
fine by me.
allowed mean, right? They haven't trademarked it or anything.
Sure.
I should know this as a stacks maintainer, but like, what are the ramifications of like having the ID be in the Buildpacks namespace versus Paketo? Like, I don't really know why that makes a difference.
At the end of the day, it doesn't make a technical difference because the only thing that the tools are doing is comparing one string to another string to see if they're the same so that things can run there or not. It matters in a world where we thought these stack IDs and mixing concepts were going to be more important, where that string also implied a bunch of things about the environment that you're running in, so that, you know, when you put it in your build pack toml, you're saying I can run an environment that has X and X features. And if it's in the build pack namespace and they decide to publish a document describing what all the assumptions that go into the contract that go with that string are, that could contradict the assumptions we were making, and then it gets awkward. That's like the worst case scenario. But I think it's unlikely that we would end up in worst case scenario land here. I feel pretty safe.
I might admit some of my ignorance and ask a question around stacks as well. I've been hearing for the past blah, blah, blah months that the CNB project is moving away from stacks. What are they moving toward if they are moving away from stacks?
There is an RFC that describes what moving away from stacks means. It's basically the end of mix-ins.
Oh, just when they were getting started too. How unfortunate.
It turns out that mix-ins were just a thing that existed so people could get them wrong. So I think the original stacks philosophy was that the CMB project should try as hard as it can to prevent Buildpack from attempting to run in an environment that the Buildpack cannot successfully run in. But I think a lot of the feedback from people trying to use the project was that they'd rather it be optimistic and then see things fail because they're failing, rather than doing a lot of aggressive checking, especially because the things that are being aggressively checked, like stacks and mix-ins, are sort of metadata that need to be generated by the stack author. It's not smart enough to really know anything other than what you put on there and labels. So it's not like it was truly checking the underlying compatibility for you. It was just checking whether all of the generated metadata matched up. And then, you know, a lot of folks, you know, outside the Paketo project weren't even generating this metadata. So like, and if a Paketo build pack is like, oh, I can't run on that stack because it's missing a mix-in, it's not because it really couldn't run on that base image. It's just because nobody stuck the label on that base image, that kind of stuff. So there are just many situations where the existence of these labels were preventing things that could work from running. What you'll get from removing them is a situation where you can optimistically try to run things that really aren't going to work in the end. But that's the trade-off.
Okay, so like build packs will no longer be defined by the stacks that they run on, and then more you can kind of just throw a build and run image at them, and if it sticks, it sticks, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, and then it's trying to add a little bit of metadata, just things like the OS version, and I think there's a place for like the version like data. So like Ubuntu is Debian like, but all of the things that are preserved here are things that can be canonically checked within the image. So there's like a file called OS info that comes in these Linux distribution images, and you can compare the values in the build pack to what's actually in the image. So it's not about, you know, build pack author with metadata meeting stack author with metadata. You can look at the image itself and figure out whether it works or not.
Okay, so you're getting rid of stacks in favor of a loose description of what I will be able to run on.
We do need to move that information from like OS version file into environment variables and labels so people can perform checks that they want to, but it's all data that there's a right answer that doesn't involve like reading a white paper about how someone defined their particular stack, you know?
Sure. And the party responsible for checking that information from OS info will be build pack authors?
So one of the things that I don't love about this track of work in CMB is that we approve this RFC without a process for like migrating it and rolling it out, or without including like what kind of changes were made to pack to support build pack and stack authors. I think there's an acknowledgement that part of the reason this hasn't been implemented anywhere is because it was sort of left in an unimplementable state. But Jesse from Salesforce on the CMB team is now going back and writing a sort of migration guide and trying to fill out what exactly steps to migrating would look like.
So I guess then my question is, none of that work impacts what we would be doing in terms of producing a jammy stack. It would be how our build packs interact with that jammy stack that we're changing, I guess.
I think it's could affect both, but the changes
Okay.
haven't been made in the project yet. So right
Sure.
now we're not building these new things, we're building the old things. It's unfortunate that this didn't land before we could cut over, but that's okay. I think the difference, the one thing that I think we should do differently based on knowing that this is coming is that we should not put mix in metadata on these images.
This brings up another topic, which is the one that Dan outlines at the bottom of the comments in the RFC, Jammy RFC. He describes some use cases where there are build packs in the ecosystem that he maintains that have a strict dependency on the stack ID being something that is differentiable from the full and base images. And that's something I'd like to get rid of. It's also something that, like, from the CNV specification is clearly going to just disappear at some point in the future. And so we need some mechanism whereby we can basically, in the build phase, indicate what things are available on the run image. And normally this would have been done through mixins. I could have said, to him, like, oh, there's going to be a set of mixins. You can see that, the mixin for bash is only available on the build phase. And so that's what you can use as like an identifier. Say like, oh, I need to do this extra work in my build pack to make this work in a environment that doesn't have a shell. I guess my question there is like, what is CNB's answer to that particular problem? Because like I couldn't really figure it out from reading this RC.
I think it's a very interesting question. When you're talking about, I think the situation is slightly worse in the new world, but it's not much worse because Buildpack could never see the mix-ins before anyways. Like the only thing you had to go on was the stack ID. So you'd basically, every time you like really had a moment where you needed to make a decision like that, you'd probably need to make a new stack ID. And the cases where we do this are all for Tiny right now. It's in like the proc file build pack is one example. It's like, am I launching the process with bash or am I directly executing it? Another one is in the native image build pack. There's certain libraries that you can dynamically link against on base, but you need to statically link into a Java native image on Tiny. The situation, and this is one of the things that I wanted to bring up, is not really different in the new world because you still have one environment variable called like target ID in this new RFC that is basically just one arbitrary string that identifies your stack. So anything we do with stack ID, we could do in that field. It's like 1 degree of freedom to be like, this is what target you're building against. I don't think that's a great solution for every problem, but that is what exists. And I think we should talk about what we're doing for Jammy, because one of the things that I like aesthetically about this proposal is that it doesn't have a different stack ID for Tiny, but I worry that we maybe need that degree of freedom.
Okay. So if I get this right, you're suggesting that we do still need to have an ID, like an identifier for Tiny.
Unfortunately, I think that's true. I've been trying to think of other ways around it. Like, could we put, some environment variable on the stack image? Well, it's like, actually, the build packs don't inherit all the environment variables from the stack image, only special ones. So no. And there's other places where this has come up a lot recently where it'd be convenient to be able to inject config at the builder creation level. whether it's like I want different defaults for my environment variables on this builder versus that one. That would actually be a really nice solution to our problem here, because we know when we're making the builder what, you know, set of stack stuff we're using, so we could change the defaults. But none of that exists, and we need to make jammy stacks right now. And I don't have any clever ideas other than what we've already been doing. But if someone else had a better idea, I'd love to hear it.
Hey, any other comment around this RFC? Yeah, feel free to continue conversation if you all have an idea. Please drop it there in the RFC. All right, so okay, time to move to the next item. Leave CMD V2. Is there any update or question? Okay. Okay, now project update. HTTP server zero config is live.
Yeah, this is a
Anyone?
feature set that was proposed in an RSC a while back to allow for individuals that had static apps not have to actually write out their own HTTPD configs. A similar line of work is in the pipeline for Nginx, but that is live. That piece of work is live now. You can go to, I think it's HTTPD 0.4.0. I could put a link in there and use the environment variables, and you can do small amounts of configuration and that sort of thing for those individuals that are trying to just have a static file system and host it on using HTTP.
Great, thank you, Forrest. Yeah, please put the link there. Awesome. All right, next one. This one's mine. Paketo Buildpacks Open SSF batch profile is like. What is that? Well, turns out that Open SSF, Open Source Security Foundation, is the new home for a set of best practices that Linux Foundation has maintained for a long time in terms of the baseline of security and several other technical areas for open source projects. This is a good idea. I mean, it's a good idea to have a badge that shows at least the minimum level, which is passing. Passing level requires completing all this information and providing evidence that, I don't know, for example, the project repo include interim versions for review between releases, right? We are not obligated to say that we meet every single requirement. Probably there are some that not apply to the project, but we need to provide an justification in that case. So the first thing was to have a profile there for Paketo Buildpacks. Here in the list of projects, you can find several other projects at different levels of compliance. You can find, I don't know, Node.js, it's passing, but you can also find the Linux kernel itself. It's not passing, not silver, it's gold level. Right now, in terms of compliance with the guidelines for community engagement and VMware and all of that, the goal is to reach passing grade. Silver level is a stretch goal for later on, but right now the goal is to complete passing level. So I will be, this is completely manual. So I will be completing the information I have about the project, but there will be stuff that I just don't know, and we'll have to have a session with some of you to complete, I don't know, how do we handle security? How do we handle code analysis? something like that. So again, we don't need to say met to each one of the requirements, but we need to say something. How do we handle this right now? So yeah, that's one of the many action items from the health assessment that I started since late last week. And hopefully we'll be able to present to you all very soon. But this is just part of many things to keep supporting the project. Right. Okay. Next up, what to do about failed release of Git Buildpack.
Yeah, so this has been something that annoyed me this over lunch and this afternoon. I was trying to cut a release of the Git Buildpack, removing all of their stack identifiers other than the wildcard operator. I got approval for that, cut the release, and I discovered that currently GitHub actions are degraded. And when I cut the release, no action was launched for the push Buildpack action, which means that there's no publishing of our Buildpack anywhere. It's just a GitHub release at the moment. This is particularly annoying for this particular action because it is triggered by the publish workflow, like the publish action. So when you click the publish button, this workflow is triggered by that. And I assume that it takes information from that event action to actually run. I can't trigger this action any other way. So like if I go in there, sometimes you can manually trigger an action, can't do that. And so I'm kind of now left with a limbo release on GitHub of the Git Buildpack version 0.4.2 or something like that, that has only had a release made. I posted about this on the Paketo Slack inside of the core dev channel, and Daniel got on and was like, yeah, this happened to us last time. There was some storms at GitHub. We had to delete the current release that we have, recreate a release, wait for the disruption to end, and then cut the release again. I'm more than willing to do that. I wanted to just, in a room full of, I think, a couple other maintainers for the utilities build packs, see if that was an okay move to do. If so, I will go ahead and go forward with it. But I guess in the future, I was wondering if it might be worth our time to look into, like, do an audit of all of our actions and see that there is a way that if GitHub has a storm where these things are lost to the internet ether, there is a way for us to go back in and actually unstick ourselves that isn't, well, I guess I'll just do it again.
I would say what Dan outlines is pretty reasonable. I ended up doing this for yarn install like a month ago. It works fine. When you delete a release, the tag for it doesn't get really deleted. You'd have to delete that also if you want to recreate everything, but you also can just leave the tag on the SHA that it's on, and then you can like recreate the release saying create it from this particular tag. That way you're not actually like moving the actual contents or changing the contents of the release in any way. So any and all of that is fine.
So sorry, say that again. When you say recreate release, but when I go in to run the action, do I have the ability to point at a tag to create a release of? Or would I just need to do it manually?
You don't even need to do that. You can go in and just say like edit the release, copy the release notes, and download the artifacts. Then you can just say create new release by like clicking the button to create a release on GitHub. Not run any of our actions, but like manually recreate the release by just clicking new release. Then you just paste the notes in and upload the artifacts, and you say create it from the tag that already exists, and then just say publish release. That should work.
I will go about doing that then.
Forrest, I did like your idea of having some like fail safe that we could do in the case where our actions don't work, because this has been happening so much and it's definitely a headache. And just always think that it'd be good to have some kind of like manual mechanism that we could do if our actions fail. Maybe you could just like file an issue somewhere that we could like use to track that.
In general, I really like it when a CI system is just running scripts or reusable components that one could just as easily run themselves rather than it sort of being tightly coupled to the context that it's running in. But it might be steps from here to there. I know when I ran into this problem, I just ended up manually pushing some images a long time ago on the Java Buildpacks, and it was not reproducible from the CI config at all.
I have recently gone through and been like trying to cut releases of like personal build packs that I have that I've been sharing with people and that sort of thing, and putting them on like my own personal repositories and the Cloud Native Buildpacks registry. The process for actually doing that is incredibly clunky, involving like 3 CLIs minimum to do, and it is a giant pain. So I would love to find a way to condense that into a more better thing, but I don't know how to do that.
I think this has always been like the bigger issue with GitHub Actions is that the reusable components, the action parts are actually pretty nice. You can like, they're basically just like can be containerized as like a Docker image. You kind of can just like invoke the image and have it do the thing you need to do with some reasonable inputs. But anything that goes into like the workflow file or where you like string together a series of actions that interrelate and depend upon each other, that is just kind of a nightmare to recreate locally in a sort of reasonable way.
I haven't used it in a while, so I don't know how much this solves the problem, but there is this tool for running GitHub Action workflow locally called Act. But I don't know how well maintained it is or how well it handles all types of triggers, like a release. Can it recreate a job from a release trigger? I don't know.
You have
Might
to
be worth looking at.
you have to pass it like a JSON file of mocked what the trigger is like mocked out to be. We use it quite heavily, but only really simulates pull requests and mainline kind of bits.
So that might be another option. If all I had to do is make a fake release event, we can maybe run it locally using Act.
Yeah, I think that's worth looking into. But for now, I think it'll be easier for me to just copy and paste some stuff around really quickly and download 2 artifacts to my computer. But it does get into the larger question or not larger question, and I think you guys have talked about this, and we've talked about it pretty extensively, where I think that when GitHub Actions is running, it's very nice. It's like transparent way for us to see everything and a way for users to more actively affect what the workflows are looking like. But it really does like to just sort of stop without any warning, and then that leads to slowdowns, and I think beyond slowdowns it leads us to be in weird in between phases where we can have these releases that just kind of disappear magically, and it's unfortunate. Anyway, I don't know entirely what to do about that, and I think that we've talked a lot and tried to come up with a lot of ideas. But yeah, I don't know where a good forum to actually vent these frustrations is to.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for any other comment around this topic. No. Right. Well, thank you all for your time and hope to see you next week. Thank you.